I'm Mark Caro, and welcome to episode 77 of Caropop. Our guest this week is a singer-songwriter who specializes in smart, undeniable guitar pop songs, Marshall Crenshaw. His ebullient, self-titled 1982 album is one of the rock era's outstanding debuts, featuring such tuneful, instantly indelible songs as Someday, Someway, Cynical Girl, and There She Goes Again. My college's band would play Mary Ann at football halftime shows, and the album hadn't even been out that long. Even the B-side of Someday, Someway, the tongue-in-cheek You're My Favorite Waste of Time, was great, and that came out only as a 4-track demo. Crenshaw grew up in the Detroit area and absorbed that city's musical scene as he envisioned himself as a guy with a guitar fronting a rock band. But first, he played John Lennon in touring and West Coast productions of the Broadway musical Beatlemania. In this conversation from his New York home, Crenshaw says whether Beatlemania was more of an acting or a musical job for him, and how that experience came to an abrupt end. And if you're a Sopranos fan, your mind may be blown as he reveals which vicious killer from that HBO series played Ringo on stage. Did Crenshaw always see himself as a solo artist versus a singer-songwriter in a band? How did he link up with Warner Brothers and producer Richard Gottehrer, who recently had overseen the Go-Go's debut, Beauty and the Beat? Does his beef with his debut album's sound lie more in the mix or the mastering? Steve Lillywhite, who had produced XTC, U2, and Peter Gabriel, brought a more booming sound to Crenshaw's second album, Field Day. It contains such classic Crenshaw songs as Whenever You're on My Mind, Our Town, and For Her Love. Why did Crenshaw choose Lillywhite? Does Crenshaw feel like that album's production has gotten a bad rap? Those first two albums constitute phase one of Crenshaw's career, artistic triumphs unaccompanied by massive commercial success. Someday, Someway remains Crenshaw's sole U.S. Top 40 single, which is nuts. For his next three Warner Brothers albums, he was in a different mindset as he felt sales and label pressure. T-Bone Burnett produced the rootsier 1985 album Downtown, which includes Little Wild One, Number 5, and Blues is King. Mary Jean and 9 others, produced by Don Dixon and featuring the single This Is Easy, followed in 1987. By the time of his dispirited label farewell, Good Evening, Crenshaw wasn't writing much and half the album was covers. 1991's Life's Too Short, produced by Ed Stasium, was a bounce-back album, leading off with another strong single that wasn't a hit, Better Back Off. I reviewed a Chicago show on that tour and was wowed by the hard-hitting attack of Crenshaw and his band, which included Mitch Easter. Crenshaw's perceptive melodic songwriting continued over 3 studio albums for the indie label Razor and Tie, and his most recent studio album, 2009's Jagged Land, on 429 Records. His one commercial breakthrough over that period was co-writing the Gin Blossoms' 1995 top 10 hit, Till I Hear It From You. Crenshaw still performs on his own and has been the live guest vocalist with the Smithereens following the death of its lead singer, Pat DiNizio. Have he and the Smithereens tried writing any songs together? Is he writing songs on his own? Does he ever expect to record another album? I saw Crenshaw perform solo at WXRT's Cubs opening day broadcast in 2019, so it's fitting that this Caropop conversation is going up on Cubs opening day 2023. He hits this one out of the park. Enjoy. Do you write songs all the time, or do you write songs when you have a project to write them for?
I've not written songs all the time. Never have done. Except for this one period of time when I did go on a big creative binge for the first time in my life. That lasted about a year and a half. And even then, I was doing it because I had a tape machine and I wanted to make recordings, and I just had this feeling that it was time.
When was this year and a half binge? Was that early on or sometime in the
No, it was about 1979 into 1980, and maybe a little bit into 81. It's roughly in that time frame. Yeah, it was the time period leading up to my first album. It started when I was in Beatlemania.
You were John Lennon, and you were like an understudy in Broadway, and then West Coast and the touring company, I think.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad that that's like started to sink in with people, because I've seen he was in the off-Broadway show, Beatlemania, different things. But that's correct. It was an understudy for 6 months, and then West Coast, and then touring company for about a year. And during that time, I just started to conspire with myself.
Did being inundated with all those Beatles songs seep into your songwriting? I mean, certainly those early songs you were writing were incredibly tuneful, so that would make some sense.
I don't think that being in Beatlemania had anything to do with what I came up with as an artist. The part about being in Beatlemania that did influence my behavior then was just being around other guys my age. Like guys like Rob Lawfer was one guy who's a Californian, and Glenn Burtnick was another one who went on to do a lot of stuff. A guy named Robert Miller. He was really interesting because he was a drummer, but then taught himself to play guitar so he could audition for Beatlemania. And that really made my jaw drop because I'd been trying to play guitar my whole life. And here comes this guy who learns it in 6 months and can play all the stuff in Beatlemania. But anyhow, Robert Miller went out to become like an orchestral composer, and has done all kinds of things, Field Lake film scoring and writing commercials that are on during the Super Bowl. Anyway, there were a handful of guys who were really interesting, and I could see that they were ambitious and focused, and that just kind of made me think about myself, and what I should be doing. But I mean, the music I came up with was like a sum total of everything that was in my head and that was around me. And that was a whole lot more than just the Beatles, Right.
Yeah, obviously. Was Beatlemania more of a musical job or an acting job?
It was an acting job and a musical job for sure. And in fact, that's another person who was in it with me. A guy named Al Sapienza was in Beatlemania the same time I was. And I was even in a company with him and a band with him. And he was never a musician, He learned how to play the drums, and could play the stuff that he needed to play to be in Beatlemania. But he later went on. He was Mikey Palmese during the first season of The Sopranos.
Oh, wow.
And I remember when they killed him off, I'm like, oh, don't do that to him. Don't take away his gig like that.
He was a mean bastard, Mikey.
Yeah, he got killed at the end of the first season. But anyway, that's Al.
Wow.
Very colorful character. And he was a Ringo in Beatlemania. It was the most
that's
far-fetched.
Hilarious.
It was utterly far-fetched in every way, but he just saw an opportunity and grabbed it. But so there were guys like that. There were guys who just kind of drifted into it. Some people were into it because they were just Beatle fanatics, and that's all they cared about or thought about. It really was a mixed bag of different people, but a handful of really serious music talents that I crossed paths with too,
Did you discover that you liked, you probably knew this already, but that you liked the music part more than the acting part?
Well, I didn't like the acting part. I just didn't want any, it wasn't my thing at all. And I was terrible at it and ill-suited for it. But I got in the show, and it really opened lots of doors in my life. Not specific kind of business door, it just changed my life a lot when I got in it. So it was a really good thing for me. But eventually I quit, because I kept getting warnings. One time this stage manager confronted me, and he really reamed me out. He was a Broadway guy, and he could see that I didn't have any kind of Broadway work ethic that he thought, somebody in that show should have, attacked me verbally and threatened to have me fired and stuff. But I ignored him. I wasn't going to do what he wanted me to do. And then later on, another person kind of nudged me, you're in a precarious position here. But that guy was a friend of mine, still is a good friend of mine. And I thought, okay, I got to go. It's time.
What were they nudging you to do?
There was this bit in the show. I should have just done it, but I didn't want to. But there was this bit in the show where you were supposed to kind of talk in this cute Beatley way and with your fake English accent and stuff like that. I just let the other guys do it, I didn't want to humiliate myself. It's so stupid what was going on in my head, you know. I don't know. It's just like a contrarian, I guess.
Did you spend a lot of time working up your Liverpudlian accent for that?
No, I didn't. I mean, I barely tried, and I just thought, no, I sound silly. I can't do it. So I would just let the other guys do that stuff. I mean, no, I was kind of lucky to get the job, I guess. But when I got in the West Coast company, it was because somebody had gotten hurt in that company and they needed to send an understudy. And there were two of us in New York. I could play the guitar solo to get back, and the other guy couldn't play it. So I got sent.
Well, there you go. Well, you know, and you wound up having a bit of musical talent for that show as well. So, like, you're the most famous alumnus from, despite the crap you got from these people, you're the one people get. You know, Marshall Crenshaw was in that show. Like, you're the alumnus.
I suppose so. But again, there are other people that went out and accomplished stuff in the world too. Besides, I'm
still blown away that Mikey from The Sopranos was Ringo.
That's a wild one. Yeah, definitely.
I'm not going to get over that all day. I'm going to be like, dude, did you know this? That's Ringo. So you grew up in the Detroit area. I read that you had a high school band called Astigfa, which stood for A Splendid Time is Guaranteed for All. So you had a Beatles thing going on before Beatlemania.
Oh, sure. I love them. Yeah, I still do.
Growing up, did you feel like being in Detroit? Were you exposed to Detroit music at the time? Were you like listening to Beatles? Were you already into Buddy Holly and earlier stuff? Like, what were your sort of formative musical things going on in suburban Detroit?
Well, yeah, I was exposed to Detroit stuff. No, most certainly. I mean, that was the only thing I knew, right? I never went anywhere else until I got out of high school. Really, I never was on the other side of the Mississippi River until I was about 24. So yeah, it was, you know, the Detroit area was the whole world as far as I knew. I mean, as far as what my own experience was, you know, but, let me see, rock and roll music was the soundtrack of my family life. Because it was the music my dad listened to, which was unusual for somebody from his age group at that time. It was completely off the wall, in fact. But this was weird. Like, when he was dying, like he'd saved up a bunch of stuff that he wanted to tell me that he'd never told me before. And one of them was that he grew up in a black neighborhood and his family lived in a black neighborhood till he was 12 years old. I don't know why that was the secret, but he told me. But that's where his musical taste was coming from always, you know. And anyway, he listened to the rock and roll station, probably because he couldn't get the R&B station. The R&B stations in Detroit that I remember, like WCHB and whatever the other one was, their signal dropped off as soon as you crossed 8 Mile Road.
Huh.
You couldn't get the black stations out of Detroit, and that's kind of symbolic right there. But anyway, so I heard rock and roll in my life. I had cousins that I was really close to. It was a big, close-knit family. Neighbors down the street, you know, I just heard the music and fell in love with it. You know, I just was a fan from then on and interested in it. I was like on the path of the music as far back as I can remember, you know. And there was always a lot of local and regional stuff. Detroit very much has its own character, its own singularity, you know, always has. So yeah, I just, you know, soaked up whatever I could soak up. One of my favorite history books of the city of Detroit and one of my favorite books about popular music is a great big book that came out about 3-4 years ago about this record, Fortune Records, which is really a quintessential Detroit record label as much as Motown. I think Fortune only had the national hits, but locally they were kind of a big deal. And that's a real Detroit label. And they just put out hillbilly music, they put out black music, they put out polkas and stuff from the Middle East. It's a kind of a real mom and pop operation.
Yeah, I don't know Fortune Records.
Well, one of their national hits was one called Village of Love by Nathaniel Mayer. You know, you can find that one. there was a local hit that they had called Mind Over Matter by Nathaniel Mayer, which is one of the best rock and roll records ever made. And then they had a national R&B hit with one called Bacon Fat by Andre Williams.
I love that.
Their stuff is wild, and anyway, Detroit music, it just goes on and on. Oh, the early Motown stuff too, I really loved, like Playboy by the Marvelettes and What's So Good About Goodbye by the Miracles, and all that early stuff I loved. The DJs would play it and really, really talk it up. Jack Scott was another guy. He was a big rock star in the 50s. He was a Detroit guy. His name is kind of forgotten now, but he was really, he was right up there back in my childhood.
When you first picked up a guitar, were you thinking, I want to do this, like I want to perform, or was it more like I just want to learn an instrument?
I made up my mind at some point that I was going to pursue a life, that was centered around popular music. I made up my mind early as a little kid, and rock and roll specifically. That was, it's funny, but that's what happened, Was
there any moment that inspired that, or was it just a general, like you just sort of had that feeling and you're like, all right, let's do it?
It was a lot of stuff. I just loved the music. The other thing was, it's the kind of kid I was. I had like a bullshit detector. Like I could tell that a lot of adults around me were really dumb. But, I was taught to defer to them and follow the rules that they made and all that, and that was kind of a drag sometimes. And, rock and roll was like an alternate or an antidote to that, It's just like I could see that it was coming from an interesting world. And so that was another reason. It just suited me, It's just like I was just drawn to it because of the music and just because of what it seemed to represent to me.
What was the first song you ever wrote?
First one I ever wrote? I don't know. I mean, I would just kind of make up stuff in my head. If I was sitting in my desk in school, I might just be making up some song. But the first song I wrote one called Summer's Over. I don't know. I never really got serious about songwriting, honestly, until that creative binge period that I mentioned before. That was really when I really sat down and said, okay, now I'm doing it. I'm going to create this body of work because I know what I want it to be. That's when that happened.
And you were like in your mid-20s by that point, right?
Yeah, I was in early 20s. 24, 23, something like that.
When you were writing your first songs, were you sitting there with a guitar? Were you sitting with a pad of paper? Did you write lyrics first? Did stuff come into your head like hooks, and then you sort of had to figure out a way to record them, to remember them? Like what was your process?
Yeah, it would always be the guitar, no other instrument. I never write the words first. The whole reason I'm doing the songwriting is so I'll have something to play on my guitar, basically. So that's what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to get a vehicle together for myself to play guitar and make a record. But anyhow, yeah, I use my guitar and I write a song. So far I have. I mean, I think now and then about, what if I got a keyboard? And what if I started writing songs again? Should I get a keyboard? I don't know. I can't play I'm a guitar player, you could say, and I can't play keyboard, but neither was Brian Wilson. He wasn't really a piano player. Whenever you see him play the piano, it's always either eighth notes or 16th notes in the right hand. And then whatever's going on in the bass line, still it's eighth notes or quarter notes or whatever, but harmonically is where it's incredible,
Right.
But you can see that he's not really a piano player. He's got this way of composing where he plays this really crude style of piano, but it's in his head, the harmonies and everything.
The key with him is he seems to have like these arrangements and things in his head, and then he has to sort of figure out how to download them to the Wrecking Crew or whoever he's working with to try to get them to sort of translate what he knows he wants it to sound like.
Yeah, I'd really like to know more about all that. I mean, I'm sure I could find out. It's probably on the internet, but like there's this one thing I've listened to maybe 5 or 10 times on YouTube, and it's the entire tracking session for California Girls. And, you know, he doesn't have the song finished, but he's got the changes and he's got the track. You know, he can make the backing track. So he wants to go in the studio and do that right away because that's what he loves, you know. And when he's first like slating the takes, he doesn't have the song title either. And he, like a couple times he says, okay, here we go. I'm a power mower, you're grass, take 3. And he's just making up these funny titles for the different takes. They get up to like 72 takes finally. Anyway, you can hear the saxophones. And I'm like, okay, so he had an arranger, or did he? Did he do it himself? Not sure, you know.
So going back to your songwriting, so like say something like Cynical Girl. So are you sitting at the guitar sort of coming up with the changes, and then at some point you've got the music and then you have to start figure out what the song's about?
Yeah, that's it. You know, with that one and with most of them, I think to go back to Brian Wilson for a second, I'm not sure if he always got the top line melody is the same at the same time that he got like the harmonic bed of it, you know, the chords and so forth. I think that maybe with him the top line melody came later. Not sure. But anyway, with myself, you know, not that I'm comparing myself to him, but you know, with me, I would have the top line melody and the chord changes. So with Cynical Girl, it was just take away the words, you know, everything but the words. I've got it, you know, in the moment when I'm writing it. And then, you know, the words came after the fact. First, I asked this other guy to write some words for me. And I didn't like the ones he wrote. I would do that. And then that was my way of learning that, you know, I wasn't going to be happy with it unless I did it myself.
Right.
For better or worse, you know. I wasn't going to feel like the words fit the music the way I wanted them to unless I did it. I was the only one who could really do that right. Because that's what, you know, that was the key thing, is for the words to complement the music. Anyway, Cynical Girl, I don't know. It took me maybe a week later to get some words together. But then they started to come into my mind, and I thought, this is kind of funny, and this is like some humor in this, you know. I hate TV, all that stuff, you know. Got to be somebody other than me. I'm like, this is crazy. These are crazy words for a rock and roll song.
Well, and You're My Favorite Waste of Time is the same sort of thing, where it's it's another love song, but it's sort of a love song. Like, yeah, you know, this is like, it's coming from an actual human being. It's not like generic because it's got a little twist in it.
Right. It's, you know, it's like, anyway, by the time it was all said and done, all the songs, you could say that, you know, there's like a viewpoint in those songs and like a worldview kind of. I was surprised by that myself, but it just came out that way.
I mean, when you look back on those songs, do you feel like they reflected what your actual mindset was at the time? I mean, were you looking for a cynical girl? And, you know,
it's not, they're not always literally about a person or anything like that. You know, the point is just okay, I'm going to start quoting somebody else, but I really like what James Taylor said. Somebody was asking him, well, is this song about that person, or is it about that time that you da-da-da? And he said, you know, really a song is about itself. And I thought, I just understood, you know, that made sense, you know, because you get like this spark of energy or inspiration and you think, okay, what's that, you know, and you just try to actualize it without fucking it up. You know, you try to be true to that initial spark or that initial flash. That's your job. Like I said before, you know, the words have to, for me, they have to fit with the music and complement it. You know, the other day, they asked me about There She Goes Again. He said, well, what's that song about? And is it about this? And I said, well, you're asking me what the words are about. What the song is about, for me in part, is, you know, it's this drum beat that I borrowed from a record called Backfield in Motion by Mel and Tim, with eighth note triplets on the hi-hat. I started off with that beat. That was the beginning of the song for me. And that same beat is also on It's All Right by the Impressions, like a hardcore favorite of mine since I heard it when I was 9 years old. But it's just like a Chicago soul drum beat. So when you say, is There She Goes Again about this or about that, it's like there's more than just it's like the totality of it. The words are just a part of the totality. But, a lot of times there's like stuff about personal experience in the songs, my own personal experience. You might get a bit of that. Might be something I grab from another song. It's just different things, that I kind of shove in there. But, they're good. I think that, the words to my songs are, I have a great respect for the importance of good writing, and I figure if you don't have good lyrics to a song, then the whole thing just completely sinks, So
yeah, and I'm glad you didn't find like some Bernie Taupin type to do because your lyrics are excellent and they reflect the songs. It all seems like it's all organic and it all sort of goes together. They're excellent lyrics. So
Oh, thanks. Well, that's the whole thing of it. Is when it's all said and done, it's supposed to be characteristic of me. Right.
So when you were imagining yourself, recording this stuff, did you see yourself as solo artist Marshall Crenshaw getting musicians around who were complementary, who would help you achieve your vision? Or did you see yourself in like a band in which you were like the lead guy or one of the two lead guys and it was like the band that Marshall Crenshaw was in?
That was another thing I finally understood, is that I really had to do it myself, and I didn't want anybody telling me anything about anything. Like I'd been in one band, that was kind of like supposed to be a democratic situation, and I finally just couldn't stand it anymore. And that was like one and done after that, with all these different egos and viewpoints and stuff. And I'm like, forget it, So then when I first started creating my own stuff, it was just my brother and me, me and my brother. Myself.
I think it's my brother. It was my brother and I. I think that's right. I think you got it right the first time.
Yeah, that's right. I did it. My brother did it. My brother and I. I should call my mother. She was a high school English teacher. But anyway,
you got it right.
Okay. It was just us, him and me, and then sometimes it was just me by myself because I figured out how to overdub on my 4-track machine and make it sound like a rock and roll record all by myself. But a lot of, having him with me was a beautiful thing about it. I realize now just how we shared this experience and how exciting it was for us to realize what we were doing. So that was important, to have an ally. And then, of course, my other ally always is my wife. I've been with her forever, and I'd be dead without her. But anyhow, as far as the music goes, I just realized that, I can't think of any other way to put it, but I just realized, I understood that I had a vision, I really did. Like I just had this thing in my mind, and I knew what it was, and I had to just chase it all by myself. That's how it went.
You're my favorite waste of time. I've heard I think it's a 4-track recording that I've heard. I think that's what's out. Did you ever do a full studio version, or is that one of those early ones you were doing with your brother or on your own?
Yeah, that's one that I did at home, and that's the only one anybody knows, except there was a live version on an album. But, like, why would I redo it? That 4-track recording is it,
Right.
I don't need it to be any better than that. It's good enough. I did it when the song was brand new and I was excited about it. I'm like, wow, I got a song, let's go. And so it's got that kind of immediacy to it. And no, it's fine. The other thing about those recordings that I made at home back then, even though I had cheap equipment, they have highs, like actual highs. I just used like Shure SM58s and Shure Unidynes, but they picked up like above 10K a little bit, I think. And there's bottom too, so there's like bottom and top and lots of stuff in the middle. they're good recordings. I can't even believe it. They were just like done very much on the cheap, but they work for me.
A couple of weeks ago, I saw this group in Chicago, a Chicago group, the Flat Five. Kelly Hogan is in it, Nora O'Connor and Casey McDonough, and just people who are in NRBQ right now. And they covered "You're My Favorite Waste of Time." I think it was the second song they did.
They played that song.
They played it. I just saw them at the Evanston Space like 2-3 weeks ago.
Oh, that's wonderful! I can't believe it.
It sounded awesome.
Oh, that's great.
I'll see if anyone like put it on YouTube or anything, and I'll send it to you. But yeah, they have wonderful harmonies in it. But I was just thinking, you're like sitting at home coming up with this thing on 4-track, and now, over 40 years later, it's still getting played, and that song exists in the world in various forms.
That song was a smash hit in England and parts of Europe. That's maybe the song of mine that's made the most money over the years. Honestly. And like you said, it's just this silly little tune.
I didn't say it was a silly little tune. I like it a lot.
Maybe silly's not the right word, but it's like just this thing that I made up in my head one day. And yes, it has. It's had a really crazy long afterlife. Remarkable.
So when you went into the studio for the first album, so you've gotten signed to Warner Brothers, you're doing your self-titled eponymous album with Richard Gotterer, who done a lot of kind of early 60s stuff and also just done the Go-Go's album.
Yeah.
Did he put together the band? Like, how much control did you have to relinquish for that record, and how much were you able to hold on to?
Let me see. Before I worked with Richard, before I made the Warner Brothers album, I did a single on the Shake Records label.
Something's Gonna Happen.
Yeah, with Alan Betrock. I mean, that's a darn good rock and roll record, I think, and
I agree.
It's got a really great sound, with real bottom heavy kind of sound. I mean, I didn't want to give up any control, even when I worked with Alan. And Alan was on board with this too. He'd heard the home recording I made. And he said, well, we'll just remake that, but we'll do it in this 24-track studio, And on Something's Gonna Happen, we pulled that off, I think. And it's got all the same elements as the home recording I made. And then when I did my album, I don't know. I think I felt under pressure right away as soon as I got a record deal. I was having more fun before we got the record deal. But anyway, I didn't want to give up any control because, up to that point, I had done everything myself. And I was happy with the way that worked, and also what it led to, because I mean, I wouldn't have had a record deal without all those. Maybe a shame that I didn't have professional quality equipment when I did all that stuff, because then that could have been the record. But anywho, Richard was really good. He had a lot of ideas. He wanted me to bring in Will Lee and Anton Fig to play on the record. But I wouldn't do it. I just refused, I wanted to have Robert and Chris because, we'd really done our thing in the clubs, and we built, we just built it up from the grassroots and really blew it up good as a live band. And we were a really good live band.
Right. Robert being your brother who you've been playing with for years.
Yeah. So, I wasn't going to entertain the idea of not having him play on the record. And the same way with Chris Donato either, Chris was, somebody who'd been around, he was in this band called Desmond Child and Rouge before he was in our band. I'm not sure if he played on their records or not, but, I think he played on some records, but, he could he did it. He could do it. I know Will Lee could have done it faster. Anton is great. I just played with him about 3 months ago. Will is great. They're both great, but, I wanted the band, we were the people that had made the whole thing happen. The three of us, me and those two guys. So anyway, that was one issue where I just was not going to budge. And I got a co-production credit on the record. See, I've told this story a few times, but I started out trying to record myself and just kind of not being able to satisfy anybody, including myself. Part of the problem there was that I'd done the songs a couple other times in the studio just for different reasons, like maybe somebody asked me to, like a label, A&R person asked us to go make demos for them. You know, I'd done the songs a bunch, and I needed somebody. Richard came in, and just he really had a lot of enthusiasm and all that stuff like that. But he also had an approach he wanted me to use, which was on each track, you know, he would say, okay, what we need, okay, now we got the drums, we got the bass, we do all that first. Then he'd say, okay, go, now you got to go out and put 6 rhythm guitars, 6 acoustic guitars on each track. And he called it thickening, you know, just give us a bed and then we'll put everything on top of that. And I didn't want to do any of that, but I did it because by that time I knew if I didn't just kind of help him and have him help me, that I was never going to get out of there. The label was never going to say yes to the record, you know. So that became the goal, is just to make a record. So it was a compromise on the first album, and then on the second album, I just said, "I'm not this time." I told the producer and the engineer, I told them, this time it's 1 guitar and maybe an overdub or a solo, but I'm not layering guitars. I'm not doubling vocals unless I want to do it. And that's Field Day, you know. It's just
Steve Lillywhite.
Just guitar, bass, and drums on each track. And it sounds amazing. Anyhow, the first album, I mean, you know, I love it. And it's all good. And I still like Richard, too. I just saw him a little while ago. It was nice. It was, you know.
What was your reaction to hearing the record as, like, here's my debut album and you're listening to it for the first time? Like, what was your reaction to it?
Well, you know, I was really terrified the whole time during those early years. Honestly, there was a part of me that was just terrified and like didn't trust show business. You know, so and I went to the mastering session not knowing what mastering was. You know, like we finished, and I was really hands-on with the mixing and everything like that, and we got all of that done. And then I said, "Oh, great, right?" And then somebody said, "Well, now we have to master it." I said, "What's that?" But I went to the session, you know, and the first thing I noticed was that they were starting to tweak it, you know, and they were like dumping out low end, right? They're like the bottom is going away. And I'm like, well, what's going on with that? And then the guy said, well, maybe the engineer or the producer said, well, we don't want the record to skip. And when it gets played on the radio, we want the mid-range to jump out. So that's what you did back then, I guess. And so, I mean, I was aware that when the record got put on vinyl, there were differences between that and what I heard in the control room.
Interesting.
When we did it, you know,
and it was because of the mastering, not the mix.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, it's just these are things that only I know. You know, this is how it was from my point of view. You know, but I do remember being in a car after a gig or before a gig or something like that, and a station in Philadelphia put the thing on and played the whole first side on the air.
Wow.
And it blew my mind. Yeah, to have a record out, it was incredible. You know, it was fantastic.
And you just went back to that record because there was a 40th anniversary edition that came out for Record Store Day, and then Yep Rock has a CD version as well. Did you tweak the mastering on those newer versions, or is it the same?
Yeah, we did. I did, and but I worked with Greg Calvi again. He was the guy who did it the first time, and he's done all my records since then. At that first session, even though, you know, I was wrapping my mind around what mastering was and kind of going, oh, really? Geez. But, you know, at the same time, I'm bonding with him personally because he's just a very cool guy, and I knew that he knew what he was doing. So we've worked together from then until now. But this time we just kind of took a whole fresh, because it would have been dumb to try to just do it exactly the same way as before. He's got all different gear, and it's many, many years later, and we're both older and wiser and everything like that. And it's a different culture around record making. You don't have to worry about. See, at the first session, I remember Greg had a lathe over, you know, a disc cutting lathe against one wall in his room, you know, because he made you an acetate right there. There's no more of any of that. So we just went at it with fresh ears. And yeah, we certainly did not dial the bottom out of it.
Oh, nice.
You know, there was no reason to. And I like it better because I feel like just the way it was back then. It really needed the support from the band, you know. And now it's there. I like it better now.
When that album came out, I mean, it's, again, you're doing a 40th anniversary version. It's like this beloved record. How did you feel sort of going from that into the second album? Did you feel like this boost of, hey, I'm on a roll, or did you feel kind of nervous, like, hey, I did really well, I wish it had sold better, or I wish I'd had more hit singles, or like what was your mindset about it, other than you'd done this really cool record?
Well, like I said, you know, I did have mixed feelings about my first album, but God, you know, it was a very chaotic time. The business is really fast paced, very competitive. It was overwhelming to me, and I didn't walk into it well prepared at all. It's like I really refused at that time to take the business aspect of it seriously. I just couldn't, you know. And there was like a lot of hype attached to the thing when it came out, you know, big spread in Rolling Stone and all that thing like that. It really kind of blew my mind, all of that. But anyway, we toured until we couldn't tour anymore. And somebody said, well, what do we do now? And somebody else said, well, make another album. You know? And it wasn't even a year after the first one. But rather than shrink from the challenge of that, or say, well, I thought, wow, yeah. I love making records. Let's make another record. So, and I thought to myself, this time I'm going to do everything according to my own wishes. I'm not going to, you know, like do the layered guitars. I'm not going to do that. This other thing that I got talked into doing or got forced to do, not doing any of it. So that was Field Day, you know, and I knew I wanted to work with Steve Lillywhite. Specifically knew that I wanted to work with him because I heard his records in the clubs. The DJs would play the records over these big ass sound systems like Generals and Majors by XTC and I Will Follow by U2 and like Hong Kong Garden by Susie and the Banshees. And I just, you know, I heard something because I really wanted to kind of go larger than life, you know, like a lot of the records that I love that are my favorite records, they have this kind of otherworldliness to them, this larger than life quality. I'm thinking of like, I'm a King Bee, Slim Harpo. If you know that record, it's like, what planet did this come from? Or, you know, I've loved Bo Diddley since the first time I ever heard him. All those records, you know, real bottom heavy and just sound like they came from outer space. Phil Spector, I mean, I know his name is like a curse word anymore and all that stuff like that, but I really was hardcore in love with those records. I still listen to them. And what Steve was doing, I just said, I can harness this, you know? So I sought him out, and he hadn't really done anything at that time at all. The only thing he'd done in America was he did a record with a band from Atlanta called The Brains. And that was it. He was like really successful in England, nothing in America up to that point. But I heard the stuff that he was doing. And so, you know, he came over and saw us play at the Warner Theater in Washington, D.C. That was an amazing night, like a peak night of my life, really. And yeah, he said, sure. And he was the only producer I talked to. You know, he was the one I wanted. I asked him, he said, yes, done, you know. So off we went. And then the engineer, I don't know if you know who the engineer was, but it was Scott Litt.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
I don't think I realized that he engineered that album. I knew him from the DBs at that point, you know, like he'd done Repercussion, the DBs, and then went on to Katrina and the Waves and then REM famously. But yeah, no, his stuff sounds very clean too. Scott is really talented. It was like a dream team with those two guys, you know. And with myself too, because I was very much in the mix of the whole thing, and maybe too much some of the time. But anyway, that's what we did. We went into the power station, and what I loved about the power station is that, unlike the record plant at that time, the power station had tons and tons of tube equipment. It was very rare at that time. You just didn't see it that often, or hardly ever. But they had racks and racks of it, and so that's another thing that kind of is part of the sound of Field Day, is all that tube equipment. I remember when that album came out, and you know, it's great songs on there, and And I remember the reviews of it, there was a lot of discussion about the production of it. And you listen to it now and you're not like, oh my God, this is like this crazy 80s production. But at the time, people seemed to draw more attention to like the drum sound and the Lillywhite thing. Did you feel like that was like, where the hell's that coming from?
Yes, I did. I just thought this is such asinine nonsense, you know. All the negative things people said about it, I thought were completely lame, you know. One review, I still just remember the opening to it. First line in the review, the guy said, Marshall Crenshaw is a rock and roll conservative. And then went on to expand on that thought, you know. And I'm like, I'm a what? I mean, you listen to the record, right? And now you're calling me, what do you know about me? Nothing, you know. So I was like, I'm still angry about what happened with Field Day, actually. I never did get over the anger.
There's this other version, what, it was an EP that had like remixes. Did you sign off on that, or was that the record label coming in, or like, where did that come from?
That was the manager I had at the time. That was something he cooked up. He's just trying to get people in Burbank to like us more. That's all. You know, but I mean, I didn't have anything to do with the EP. I knew it was happening. I just thought, yeah, fine. I don't even care anymore. Honestly, I just was like so overwhelmed by all the business stuff that eventually I said, fuck it, I don't even care anymore.
Well, it's funny because you said that you sort of felt like you weren't sort of involved enough on the business side, but on the other hand, it seems like the business side messes you up artistically because you start thinking about that, and then you're not like concentrating on just being this great songwriter anymore because you have this sort of looking over your shoulder a little bit at, you know, what's happening on the corporate side.
Yeah. I mean, you know, so I have to take the responsibility for all that, but that is what happened. I just like my sister-in-law, my brother Robert's wife, is a dog trainer. And she says that it's your job as a dog owner to set your dog up for success. And that's what I didn't do that for myself. You know, I did the music and the songs, all that stuff. All of it has had longevity because it's great and it's because it's well thought out and well executed. But all the other stuff, it was a buzzkill to me to think about it or to hear about it. So I just didn't address it. I couldn't, you know, I just wasn't capable at the time. I learned pretty quick what the business was and how it worked. And, you know, I got it, but and all that, you know, but I didn't know enough going in, you know, like I wanted us to have hit singles, but I just had no idea how hit singles happened in the real world. I didn't know anything about it. It would have done me maybe some good to know in advance, or maybe I would have just like, don't tell me that.
Well, you wrote Whenever You're on My Mind. What else were you supposed to do? And it seems to me that if you write and record the great hit single, it's not also your job to get it out into the world. Like, what do you think you did wrong?
Well, you know what, though it is. I mean, because nobody bumbles their way through the business and has a good result that way. Nobody does, you know. It's not people's part of public image necessarily that they're business conscious, but you know, I've seen enough various people's up front to know what their behind the scenes deal is, you know, and they all understood. The ones I'm thinking of who really did well, they knew what business they were getting into and they were really serious about it. And when I saw that, how they were, I was like, oh, you know, I mean, anybody that really, there's got to be at least somebody in the organization somewhere who really knows what's going on and it takes it seriously. But there was kind of nobody in my group that had a clue or wanted to have a clue.
So what would you or whoever in your group have done to make Whenever You're on My Mind a hit, or Field Day a hit album?
What would we have done?
Yeah, like what was the thing that you didn't do that could have changed?
You know, I mean, I don't want to go into all that, but there's a book you can get called Hitman. I
read that.
Okay, well, that's
long time ago, but yeah, it was a while ago.
That was my time period when it's got a thing in there about Warner Brothers records during that time period, and just what the business, you know, what the business environment and the all that stuff like that. Anyway,
it seems to me, and this is just me being idealistic, and I've talked to enough musicians who went through the same sort of thing, unfortunately, that like if you make a great record, it's like the reason you have a label is because they're supposed to support it and get it out, because they do. When they sell 1 million copies of something, they take most of that anyway, so it behooves them to have the hit singles, and too much great work kind of slips through the cracks. But
that's life, though. It's just like there's only so many slots, and if you want one, you got to fight for it, and you got to know how to fight for it. That's all. Right. I mean, I get all that. I've had hits as a songwriter. My own recording career didn't take off the way I wanted it to, but there were lots of good outcomes from that time. And I'm like super proud of that whole thing, that we got from point A to point B and beyond. I'm really proud of that. So this is cool. I'm just answering your questions and really trying to give real answers, but I'm not, none of it is complaining. I'm not complaining about anything.
So Intervention Records did a re-release of Field Day with, newly remastered and your approved cover, because I guess the original cover was not what you had bargained for.
Right.
Are you doing another sort of broad re-release of that album like you did for the first one?
Yes. When I made a licensing deal with Yep Rock for my first 2 albums. We might go further after that, perhaps. But anyway, there's a reissue of Field Day, a really beautiful one that comes out in July.
Which cover
it's 2 in 1 year, folks. It's all completely different. The artwork is new. It kind of vaguely resembles the earlier artwork, but for the front cover, the art director, David Gorman is his name. He took a poster that the label did for the record back then, which has this profile shot of me, and it's kind of a kind of tongue-in-cheek thing where I'm standing there like looking up at the sky, That's the front cover of Field Day now.
Nice. The original cover, it was something where they threw it together. You were like, what? And then they said, well, it'll delay the release of the album if you had to change it, something like that.
Yeah, that's what happened. Let's see, Robert, we finished the record, and you might like this story. Like the last thing we did was the song Hold It, which is the last song on the album. And by that time, I'm mentally exhausted from trying to write songs really fast. And I go in the studio when I don't have any lyrics. And the other thing is we have to finish that night too, because I got to go someplace the next day, or that night, I think I had to go someplace. And then Steve had to go someplace too. So it was like, that was the day that we had to finish the album. So we had the backing track, but just drums and guitar. I played bass on it. The bass I played was Bernard Edwards' bass.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Anyhow, I played that bass, put that on. I did the background vocals where I'm going, hold it, hold it. And then finally it's like, okay, I can't put it off anymore. I got to do the lead vocal. So I went out in the studio and I just quickly wrote a verse, and then I put that on, and then they comped it. And then I just sat at the piano and quickly wrote another verse, same thing. And then at the very end, we decided to do this kind of dub mix thing with all these wild echoes and stuff like that. Because I was really, really crazy about, King Tubby and all that kind of stuff that I heard on WLIB, all those dub mixes from Jamaica and stuff. And Steve knew how to do it, so we did it, We finished the record, and then after that, we went on vacation. My brother Robert, at the time, his girlfriend, her father was in the film business and international film distribution. So he got her a job on the production of the film Amadeus.
Ooh.
Over in Czechoslovakia, Milos Forman. So Robert was going to go over there to visit her. And as soon as I heard he was going, I just said, Ione and I are going to come, okay? You don't mind, do you? So we booked, we all booked tickets to go over to Czech. I wanted to go, and see what it would be like. And that was a pretty amazing experience. But anyway, it was like a much needed vacation, and a real just mind blower too. And then I got back from that and I saw the artwork that my then manager had cooked up. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me, you know? Don't you know any better than to put this out? But anyway, he just said, you know, you can't, if you delay it, then it's going to cause problems. So again, I said before that I was like really very haphazard about the whole business side of things. And so I just said, oh, okay, go fine, put it out. And that was a terrible thing for me to do. I just never, it just was, you know, there's really nice pictures of me from back then, but that one I don't like. Big as life, you know, like my head looks like a light bulb, you know, on the front cover of the, I just hated it, you know, but I let it go, I let it go out.
And it bothered you forever.
Yeah. And I'm just like, so when I heard that Intervention was going to do their reissue, first of all, I was delighted that Field Day was going to get some love in that way and be acknowledged like that. And I appreciated it, you know, and I said, you know, can you do me just one favor? And they said, sure, you know. So we used the front cover of the picture sleeve or Whenever You're on My Mind for that album cover. But this time around, David just, you know, started from scratch and we got photographs. I didn't know that these even got taken, but there were photographs that Yvette Roberts took at the power station while we were in there. She actually had pictures from the sessions and also she took pictures at an after party that we had for the album. I didn't know any of this stuff existed, right? But we got all that stuff. And the reissue of Field Day is especially nice. I'm really looking forward to having that come out.
I'm looking forward to it too. And then after that, you did Downtown with T-Bone Burnett. And everyone's like, oh, he's gone rootsy. Because everyone was talking about you had to use that term at that time. Was he your choice to produce the next album, or like how did that come about?
Oh, I liked T-Bone, you know, and I was fine with the choice. I liked T-Bone's solo records at that time. He had this one, Trapdoor, that I loved.
Oh yeah,
that whole exercise of making Downtown was my manager is trying to figure out how to get Burbank to like us more. Because we never had any problems with our New York A&R person. She and I, you know, got along really great. It was like two separate companies almost. The Burbank thing was a different culture, a different place.
Yeah, Burbank's where the main Warner Brothers is based, the whole movie studio as well as the label.
Yeah, that's really true. That's the epicenter of it. That's where they're located. So that's kind of what Downtown was. But, you know, I wasn't like I was never like a pushover. I always, you know, really tried to make the best of whatever the situation was. And I liked T-Bone too, you know. So, you know, we just did that record. That's what we did.
Do you look back on that record with affection, or do you feel like it's the first two albums and then you're not as, you know, attached to the next three?
The first two albums, I'm in like this one like a particular headspace at that time, where I'm just coming off of the whole thing of, well, the first two albums are, well, it's, you know, it's like it's chapter 1 and chapter 2 of my time at Warner Brothers. Chapter 1 is the first two albums. Chapter 2 is the other three. That's all. You know, it's just a different world that I'm in when I was doing 3, 4, and 5. But I still always put my heart into it, you know, 100%. Tried to do the best I could in whatever situation I was in. So
was the second chapter different because of sort of the business stuff interfering with your sort of emotional feelings about what you were doing?
Totally, yeah. I mean, I asked to get dropped from the label after Field Day. I had a private meeting with the two head honchos at the label and made what I thought was this airtight case for why they should kick me out of there. But they didn't want to do it, you know, they wouldn't do it. So I had to make 3 more albums for them. And like I said before, you know, I never really did get over the anger after Field Day, but I had to pretend like I was over it. So that's hard to do, you know, it kind of can cloud your thinking, right? But again, I'll say it over and over again. I still did my best and and I put my heart into it. And there's great stuff on all of my albums, no matter what, you know, even the album of mine that I really don't like at all. That's a couple songs on them that are
Which
great.
one is that?
The ones I don't like are Good Evening my last album for Warner Brothers.
Right. That was my guess, but I didn't want to.
That's one of them. I'm not going to say what the other one was because we hurt somebody's feelings, and I'm not going to do it. But anytime where I'm trying to sound like I'm trying to think, how can I get on rock radio? Anytime I'm doing that, to me, that's wrong. I never should have been having to think that way, and it's my own fault that I did. That's all.
Life's Too Short was the album that came after Good Evening, and that was Good Evening had a bunch of covers on it. Life's Too Short was really back into the land of originals and kind of a more rocking record at the time. Were you happy with that one?
Yeah, I love Ed Stasium. He's still a good friend. It was great working with him. Yeah, sure.
And then you had these albums for Razor and Tie, Miracle of Science, number 447, and What's in the Bag. What was your headspace for? I don't know if that's chapter 3 or chapter 4, but you're working for a smaller label, and presumably that Warner Brother kind of pressure is off of you. Like, how did those feel to you?
Yeah, it's completely off at that time. I felt like I got back on track with those 2 albums because it was just me. I was kind of back where I started. They're mostly home recordings, better equipment, expensive microphones and all that kind of stuff. But by that time, I, had bought some for myself. 2
things. One was Till I Hear It From You. So there's a hit single that you co-wrote, but it was a hit for the Gin Blossoms. And I've read the story about how you guys did that together. Is that cool that you hear that? Like, when you heard that for the first time, was that how you expected the song to come out?
It was like a real joy, that whole thing. Yeah, it was magical. It was really, really nice. Very well timed,
And the last time I saw you, aside from the opening day thing, was you were playing with Smithereens at the Skokie Summer Fest. You seem like you're having a really good time. Are you still doing the Smithereens stuff? And how is that sort of parachuting into another existing band and not having, all the weight on your shoulder with your own stuff?
Yeah, I do really like doing it. It's lots of fun. They make it real, real easy for me all the time. No pressure at all. Nothing at stake emotionally for me. And so it's like it's like a vacation. And they're a great rock and roll band too. That's the other thing is I'm up there to play with Dennis and Mike and Jimmy, and they just really are a great band to play with. It's very exciting to play with Dennis and those other guys. I love it.
Would you guys ever write new Smithereens songs together?
I don't think so. I mean, Jimmy saying from the start that he wants to do it, but I don't think we ever will. And I don't, it's not my thing.
Do you see yourself doing any other albums coming up?
Myself, no, I don't. But that doesn't mean I won't. It's just not on my mind right now. I'm not going to talk about this because I put a moratorium on talking about it. But I'm doing a film project. I've been making a documentary since 2016. That's all I'm going to say. But that's really until that's done. That's really what I'm doing.
All right. Well, I look forward to hearing more about that and seeing that, and hearing the Field Day reissue this summer. Thanks so much, Marshall Crenshaw. This is a total treat for me. I appreciate you talking through all this stuff, going down little detours with me as well.
Thanks a whole lot. I dug it too. It was really great.
That's it for episode 77 of Caropop. Thanks so much to Marshall Crenshaw for being so open about his career and for writing so many songs that have gotten stuck in my head over the past 40 plus years. Seriously, my brain has been like a Marshall Crenshaw K-Tel ad since I began work on this episode. Yep Rock Records recently released the 40th anniversary expanded edition of Marshall Crenshaw's self-titled debut on CD. The vinyl version came out last year on Black Friday Record Store Day. This edition has his preferred mastering. This summer, look out for the expanded edition of Crenshaw's second album, Field Day, which features new album art. It's also on Yep Rock. Go to marshallcrenshaw.com for information about upcoming shows and projects. Caropop is produced by Chris Swake, who delivers Monday Morning Rock, Tuesday Morning Rock, and Rest of the Week Rock. I'm Mark Caro. Please follow Caropop on Twitter at CaroPopcast, and you could follow me as well at Mark Caro at MarkCaro. Also visit the Caropop website, caropop.com, where you can find this podcast and enter your email address so you can hear about upcoming episodes and events. We promise not to spam you. Please share, subscribe, and tell your friends, and tune in again next week for another Caropop conversation. Thanks.